Come on. Come on. Oh, it's not Kingpin, but I'll take it. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. Hawkeye, episode 4. This show just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and now a new player has entered the game. We're going to talk about a spoiler-heavy review, and if you like these weekly reviews, I want to bring them back. Show your support by dropping that thumbs up, or just leave a comment down below. How you feeling about this show so far? So I want to get right into the beginning of the episode, and really the cliffhanger that we leave off on from the previous episode as they're breaking into her mother's very nice place. As Hawkeye acknowledges, we see Jack kind of hold the sword at Hawkeye or Clint Barton's face, and that tells me just the way he was holding it, and the more we get about him, even though there is a moment in this episode where I'm like, oh, he's kind of being a nice guy. The more we see, the more we kind of understand that he's not who he says he is. Now, if we look at the comic book origins, we know that he is the swordsman, and you probably heard about this in other videos, but basically starting out as your average traveling circus performer with a knack for wielding bladed weapons, we eventually learn that he has a dark past, and they're kind of applying that into this series, so I'm fascinated to see where that goes, who he, and it feels like everyone in the city, at least in the underworld, is working for. We know who that is, and I'm assuming we're going to see Kingpin for the first time next week. We got the tease in the last episode. I thought maybe they would do it, but it makes sense that they're timing it up perfectly with the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, because I think there's another character that's going to be in that movie. So, simultaneous. Marvel, come on, man. That's Feige. Stop being so good. But we see Clint in this episode. He's starting to deal with things a bit differently because he's forming a connection with Kate Bishop, a friendship, and one that it feels like a deeper connection because they're both, well, obviously they have the same skill set, but they also have the same mindset about certain things. So kind of the character development that we're seeing from Kate is one thing, but also Clint and realizing that I have to do anything I can to keep her safe. And we see at the end of the episode, sometimes that means just saying goodbye and trying your best to disconnect yourself, because when a Black Widow gets involved, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the beginning of the episode and talk about the phone call between he and his wife and the missing Rolex. Now, when they said a missing Rolex, I was trying to figure out, is that code for something? Is this actually a watch? No, it's actually a watch. It's not code. So when they refer to the compound, it's obviously the Avengers compound. And when we see her kind of come across it at the end, Echo was writing notes about his family and trying to find certain things out. But that was stolen for a reason, and I'm curious to see what that reason actually was. But let's go back to the conversation at the beginning between Kate, her mother, and Jack when they're talking about his use of aphorisms, which is a very wholehearted scene, how he keeps saying things wrong and you expect him to get mad at that moment, but they have a little laugh, and that's the moment when I saw, okay, she's starting to come to terms with her mother's relationship, even though there is still something about that guy, something really obvious at this point that is off. So I'm curious to see where their relationship goes. And then we get a couple of nice conversations at the beginning of the episode where Clint and Kate are talking about like boomerang arrows. And I believe that's something that's going to come back later on in the show. Because boomerang arrows. No. She realizes that Clint is having to spend Christmas alone, can't be with his family. I'm curious to see how that comes together. I hope nothing happens to Clint. It feels like they're building up something happening to Clint, and I feel like my heart's going to break. I hope not, though, because I want to see. I mean, they keep talking about making Clint and Kate these suits, and we see that come together when they go back and revisit the LARPers, and I knew when they formed that relationship they would go back, but they're invited to some sort of get-together, a party. That's a cute little scene. Series keeps adding in these funny, quirky, silly supporting characters, but there's always a little bit of heart within all of those things, and I thoroughly enjoy that. But the conversation between Clint and Kate also gets a bit deeper when she asks him a question, and he starts to reminisce about, and he's clearly talking about Nat at that point, and the shot I never took, and how he, befriended Black Widow. And then later on in the episode, we see these things all start to come back and haunt him at once. And my favorite scene in the episode, I know I keep skipping ahead and coming back, but my favorite scene in the episode is when Kate is kind of slung off the roof and hanging by a thread, almost literally, Clint kind of reaches down, and you see him put his hand in that same position he had it when he was trying to save Black Widow before her inevitable death. And that's when he kind of, realizes, I can't have her here doing this with me because it's too dangerous. And getting thrown off of that roof, something bad could have happened. I mean, she could have landed the wrong way, and it would have hurt. I'll tell you that much. So I love that is playing into his character, a major factor into the first couple of episodes. And also his hearing loss. It's a slow progression, and it feels like it's continuing to get worse, or at least the way that he's dealing with it. That's all becoming a bit more obvious now. We're seeing him taking the hearing aid in and out of his ear, and I love this. They're having a conversation. He just kind of takes it out, and he's like, I don't want to. But that's something that I love. And, Echo's addition in the last episode and kind of her backstory, which, I didn't do a video on the last episode, but I thought it was just truly brilliant. What a wonderful way to build her character up, how she plays in. But this episode is fascinating because there are a lot of different things happening. You have the conversation between Clint and kind of, Echo's guy. He calls him a doormat at a point, but he's basically saying, listen, you don't want to get involved with this. Ronan's dead. Trust me, guys. Ronan is dead. Or that version of me is dead. And I also love seeing Clint interrogate someone. That was cool. Something that I didn't know we would see. And he has a very threatening demeanor when he needs to have one, even though he's a sweet guy on the side. So that was super nice. So we get to the scenes at the end, and of course, instead of propelling down the side of the building, she just works her way in. I feel like Kate Bishop, the way that she operates, is different from Hawkeye, even though they have the same or a similar skill set. Clearly, he is better at this point. And another thing that I loved about this final handful of scenes here is Kate kind of gets her butt whooped. And I was thinking about this. I'm like, I understand that she's had, a bit of training and she's become a very good archer, but where does she learn how to fight like that? You know what I mean? Like, she's got to slowly progress into something, but I do enjoy the fact that eventually we see you-know-who, and it throws her off the building, and Echo is clearly a better fighter, and she needs to learn how to become better in certain areas, but I need to see that progression instead of her just kind of being there all of a sudden and immediately. So I like the fact that they kind of gave us that. Again, she's handling her own, and I appreciate that. And you believe it because she's doing so good in the role up until this point. I just love their relationship so much. It's such a natural chemistry between the two actors. But I do enjoy the fact that she just kind of got thrown off the roof. That was cool. But eventually it all comes together, and she realizes that she is in Maya's apartment because Maya has been the one taking all the notes, and apparently she stole that from the compound, which was maybe her way of luring them in. Not entirely sure how that's going to factor in. But Hawkeye's like, no, I'm fighting Maya. So what's going on here? And then we see the reveal. And the second, first of all, the outfit that Yelena's wearing is very reminiscent to one she wears in the comics. So right then, I'm like, okay, all right. We saw the tease, and I'm like, that's her. It's got to be her. But then we get her fighting style, and just kind of sliding around the rooftop, just the way that she handled herself. I'm like, that's a Black Widow doing the Black Widow poses, which is something they joked about. But eventually, and they made it the big deal, which I figured they would, but the camera slowly zooms in and you get the face reveal, and I'm like, well, I mean, I guess maybe not everyone knew, right? So I knew, but it was still awesome to see her. It was so cool. Love seeing that storyline is slowly tying into this Hawkeye series. But now we have two big things going on, right? We have Maya's storyline and where that is going, and eventually leading us to probably another villainous presence in this show. And again, I'm just sitting and I'm waiting. But now we have the inclusion of Yelena. So I feel like Yelena's inclusion is going to be her eventually joining the side of Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, which is going to be fascinating. But first, there has to be some tension that is cut there, and Hawkeye has some splaining to do. So I'm interested to see how the next episode handles that and what Yelena ends up doing and how they all kind of come together. Or maybe they don't come together. Maybe she just kills him straight off, but I don't think that's going to be the case. And then how is all of that going to factor into the storyline that we have seen thus far dealing with Ronan? And Ronan is a major player in what we've seen so far. I didn't know that's how they were going to handle the show, but I think it's really brilliant. I mean, That's the best way, in my opinion, to bring all of this stuff together and to lead us to this inevitable culmination that is going to culminate with Yelena and Hawkeye and Kate Bishop and Echo and maybe Kingpin. So I can't wait to see where this goes, guys. I, for one, thoroughly enjoy this episode. It's like they just keep getting better. And even though the last episode may have had more complexity with the character development, which I love, this episode had some heart. And those really, those subtle moments with Hawkeye, you know, having those flashbacks and the memories and still dealing with the fallout of Black Widow. And now we're bringing in a Black Widow character, which is kind of tying those things together. But it makes sense, right? The narrative makes sense. They're not just including Yelena because, oh, look, here's another character, whoop-de-doo. No, they're including her because it makes all the sense in the world to bring that storyline together. But now we have that tension between Clint and Kate Bishop. It's like, I can't do this anymore. You have to leave. Of course, that's his way of protecting her, and she should know that because she's seen movies just like we have. But I'm curious to see where that goes, how they come back together, because we know that they will. And if poor Clint gets to spend Christmas with his family, I believe we're down to 2 days or 3 days before Christmas. So come on, Clint, get back home, buddy, and put on that suit. Thank you, LARPers, for working on a new Hawkeye suit. All right, guys, listen, I'm loving this show so far, but I need you in the comments down below letting me know, how'd you feel about this episode? What was your face when you saw the reveal of Yelena and Florence Pugh's presence? Just her presence makes this show even better. And if you want to support this channel and this video, be sure to drop your thumbs up. That tells me you'd like me to cover next week's episode, and I have a feeling we're going to be covering it. And by next week's episode, I will have seen Spider-Man No Way Home. So you might have a little Hawkeye video and then a Spider-Man review. It's going to be a good week. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon.